Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah's Bava Kamma, Paragimel, Chapter 3, Mishnah Daled. Okay. Shnei Kadorin. Two potters. Their businesses, they sell pots. Shahayu mahalchin zeh achar zeh. They were walking one behind the other. And this is happening in a public place. And we're talking about potters because they typically had to carry, they had a heavy weight that they were carrying.
Beams.
And because of that, I said potters, no beams, potters, P-O-T-T-E-R, they carry pots.
All right.
Okay? Mahalchin zeh achar zeh. And the case was they were walking one after the other, one behind the other. V'niskal harishon v'nafal. The first one tripped and he fell. And that had a lot to do with the fact that he was carrying these heavy things. That's why we take the case. Could have been anything, but the point here is a case where, it's a kind of situation where, and they say that over here, the Mishna speaks of potters who tend to carry large loads because it is more common for someone to stumble and fall when he's carrying a heavy weight. Now, so what happened is, V'niskal harisha v'nafal, the first one tripped and fell. V'niskal hasheni b'rishin. And then the second one tripped over the first one. And he dropped his pots and the pots broke. Or the person himself got hurt. Harishin chay b'niskei sheni. The first one is responsible for the damage done to the second one. Now, the way the Bartender explains this is that we're talking about here, when the first guy fell down, he really wasn't responsible for falling. Because we follow the opinion that we had before that tripping is not considered negligence. So the fact that he tripped is not negligence. And therefore, that alone doesn't make him responsible. What makes him responsible is the fact that although he tripped, he got to get up. He's supposed to get up and not be an obstacle in the way. And therefore, if he did not get up when he should have, and then someone tripped over him, then you're going to be liable. But in a situation where the other person tripped over him before he had a chance to get up, then you're not going to be liable for the first guy's injuries. All right? So that's what the Mishnah here means. When the Mishnah here says that the first one is liable for the damage done to the first one, that damage, I want to make sure here. Yeah, it's the way they explain it here is the first one is obligated to pay for the second one's injuries. I would assume the same thing would be regarding the damage done to the person's pots, if there were any damage done. But right now, in the very least, the Mishnah is talking about damage done to the person who tripped over the second person, tripped over the first person. So the first person should have had enough time to get up before the person tripped over him. He's going to be liable, and that he's going to be responsible, and that's why it says in the Mishnah, the first one is obligated for the damages for the injuries of the second. But if he would not have had the chance to have gotten up before it happened, he would not be responsible because we follow the opinion that niskala pesheya, tripping is not considered negligence. Let's do the next Mishnah, Mishnah Hey, Mishnah 5. Different case now. Now, zeh bava chavisai v'zeh bava kairasai. One person is coming from one direction with a jug, and another person is coming towards him from the opposite direction with a beam. You got that? Zeh bava chavisai, one guy is coming with the jug, one guy is coming with the beam. They are coming towards each other from opposite directions. Now, if they collide, what do you think? Which thing do you think is going to get broken, the beam or the jug?
My guess would be the jug.
That was a very good guess. That was very well thought out. Nishbra kadei shalzeh b'karasa shalzeh, and lo and behold, the jug of one was broken by the beam of the other.
Wow.
Putter. The owner of the beam is exempt. Both of them have permission to walk in the public domain. So that is, since the owner of the beam was using the public domain in the usual way, he's not liable. So the way they elaborate this here on the bottom is, the two people were walking towards each other when the damage occurred. Therefore, it was the force of both that made the jug break. Since the owner of the beam did not provide the entire force that broke the jug, he need not pay for it. Again, because, however, he is exempt only if he was using the public place in the usual way. But if let's say if instead of walking he was running, which is not the usual behavior, and that is how this collision happened, then he's liable. If you're already the person acting in the unusual manner, you become more responsible than the person who's acting in the usual manner. Okay? So therefore, in our case, the first case of the Mishnah, as it says, each one has permission to walk in the public domain. Each one is doing what they're allowed to do, and therefore the person who broke the other person, the owner of the beam who broke the jug, is not going to be responsible. Now, here the cases we have, the owner of the beam, he's in front. The owner of the jug is in the back. Nishbis chaves b'kaira, and now the jug broke because of the beam. Why is that? How did it happen?
Did he stop?
Well, let's see. Okay. Nishbara chaves b'kaira, pater ba'al hakaira. The ba'al hakaira is exempt. Now, why is he exempt? So the case here is, now you'll see from the next part of the Mishnah, the case here is not that the guy stopped in front. Not that the owner of the beam stopped in front, but apparently the guy from the back was walking quicker than the guy in the front, and therefore he slammed into the beam with his jug. And in that situation, being that the first one was doing things okay, he was walking regularly, and the other one was the guy hurrying, because otherwise he would have not have done that. That's why the person in the front, the owner of the beam, is exempt. So let me read to you here from the bottom. When two people are walking one behind the other, it is always the responsibility of the person in the back to remain a safe distance between them. Mm-hmm. You know, you both have a right to go. You're both walking, so take care of yourself. In this case, therefore, where the owner of the jug was walking behind the owner of the beam, it was the fault that it was his fault 2 items collided and his jug broke. Mm-hmm. You know, as long as the other guy was doing what he was supposed to regularly do, you have the responsibility to make sure that you don't get things messed up. And if you did, that means that you were not being careful enough. Therefore, the owner of the beam is exempt. Now, but if the Ba'al HaKaira stopped, he stopped. And because of that, the other guy crashed into him and his jug broke. Chayiv. Then the owner of the beam is going to be responsible. However, one needs to qualify this. This law applies only where the owner of the beam stopped in order to rest. And you don't rest in the middle of the public domain, in the middle of the street. But if he stopped for just a moment in order to shift the weight of his burden, he is not liable, because this is a normal behavior even in a public area, and the jug owner should have expected it. So again, if you stop to rest, not the place to rest. And therefore, because you stopped, that's why he slammed into you and it broke, you're going to be responsible. But if you stopped for a second just to adjust it, which is a normal thing to do in the public domain, then you're going to be exempt. Now, but if he said to the owner of the beam, the owner of the jug, wait, stop, meaning he's letting him know beforehand that he's stopping, right? And nonetheless, the guy kept going, putter. Then you, the owner of the beam, are going to be exempt because you forewarned him, and therefore, in this case, we say that you're not exempt for the collision that caused the jug to be broken. Now, the last part of the Mishnah is just the other way around. The front in front was the owner of the jug, and the one in the back was the owner of the beam. If it comes out that the jug broke by way of the beam from the guy from behind, chayiv. The owner of the beam is chayiv. Because again, now he's behind, he has a responsibility to be careful, and if he wasn't, then he's liable. Now, if let's say the owner of the jug stopped when he wasn't supposed to, meaning he stopped to rest, which he's not supposed to be doing in the public domain, and that's why the guy slammed into him and his beam broke that person's jug, then he's punted, he's exempt. And if he told the owner of the beam, stop, meaning the owner of the jug who was in front told the one in the back, stop. He warned him. And he still went, chayiv, then the owner of the beam is liable for breaking the jug. The last part of the Mishnah says, the same thing applies in the case, one guy is carrying a candle, one guy is carrying a fire, and one guy is carrying a bundle of flax. Okay, so if those two things come together, who's going to be in trouble? The owner of the flax, understandably, right? So everything we said, and now the same is going to apply. Depending on who is behind, that's the person who's going to be considered responsible to make sure it doesn't, if he's coming from behind, he has to make sure he doesn't get too close to the thing in front. The guy in front, if he stops when he's not supposed to, that's his fault. If he called out to the guy to stop, then the halacha is he's not responsible anymore. So they add here in the notes something very interesting. The Mishnah adds this example, meaning of the flax and the fire, because it could have been thought that since a flame can easily set flax on fire, the owner of the candle should have taken extra care to avoid a collision. He's therefore liable in every situation. You got a fire and there's flax in front of you. It's highly flammable. Maybe in that case you have a greater obligation. That in any situation you have to be ready for anything because of the greater potential, and therefore you'll be liable in every situation. The Mishnah teaches this is not so. Rather, the owner of the candle has the same laws as the owner of the beam in the previous cases. So although, again, the flax can easily be set fire by the candle, that does not obligate him to take extra care to avoid any kind of collision, and the law of the flax and the candle is going to be the same as the law about the beam and the jug. Have a wonderful day.
All right, thank you, Rabbi.